Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. I'm your host, Duncan Alney here, where we speak to leading entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And this episode is brought to you by none other than Firebelly, a company I founded. Firebelly makes brands more likable and profitable through social media marketing. That's all we do, 100% social media marketing. We were voted the top social media marketing agency this month by Clutch in the world. Firebelly has helped clients like Netflix, Qdoba, Fiji Water, and many others transform their social media marketing strategies. So if you want to make your brand more likable and profitable, let's talk. Now, with no further ado, I am so excited. I'm going to make like a half-ass attempt to introduce her, but she's such a badass. I'm just not going to do it justice. But welcome, Diana Fryc. Diana, great to have you here. Now, Diana, you've got 20 years of experience advising like small brands, big brands, huge brands with all things branding, innovation, growth, packaging, like you name it. From a marketing standpoint, you've done it, and you've worked. I was looking at the list of brands you've worked with, everything from Frito-Lay to the NCAA to Lowe's, Nike, Kind Bar, Pepsi. I mean, it is truly impressive, and I'm so excited and thankful that our common friend, Jeremy Wise, introduced us, and that you're here today. So please feel very, very welcome.
Oh, thank you, Duncan. Any friend of Jeremy's is a friend of mine, so very glad that we get to connect and excited about the fact that we might actually connect in real time next week for Sweets and Snack Show. In real time next week for Sweets and Snack Show, and also hang out with our buddy Steve Hirschberger in person. Mr. Hirschberger. Hirschberger.
You know, we've both gotten those meeting requests from him. You know, Duncan Hirsch Sync. Like that's his like keywords for like setting up meetings. Very army like. So yeah. So Diana, you're working with these brands, big brands, small brands. My sense is you probably have some formula for picking brands you work with, and what is that? Share with me and the world.
For sure. So Retail Voodoo, we are a brand development firm based out of Seattle, Washington, and my business partner and I, well, we've been working together since 2006, but he's had his agency since the early 90s. In fact, worked on the original Starbucks brand with a really crack team and Howard when they were trying to figure out what Starbucks was going to be. And over the years, as things have kind of evolved, we were a generalist firm for a very long time. And then after the 2008 recession, we wanted to start focusing on brands that had a value add at some point in their life, whether the product or service itself was a benefit to the community or the mission that they were going after, some sort of triple bottom line benefit was embedded in their brand. Now, since then, of course, and we were focusing on food and beverage in the natural space. And in 2011, naturals and better for you was really not the category that it is today. In the last 3 years, investment capital has really changed, and also food technology has really changed that category. And so now our big push is working with small, medium, and large brands that are interested in not just better for you product, but kind of has a conscious consumer conscious capitalism componentry to it, so that when we're looking at what is in the best interest of the planet or of people, it's not just so economically driven. And so we've kind of built this moniker, beloved and dominant brands. So brands that endear themselves to a consumer, endear themselves to a retailer, aside from just producing really great food or really great services and delivering something to the planet. It's really a holistic brands, or brands that want to become that. Those are the brands that want to become that, are really the people that come and work for us. If you're already a solved brand and you've got crack marketers, you're probably not going to use us unless you've got some sort of brand stretch innovation that you're needing to tackle, or you're wanting to set up your brand for a sale or a merger, in which case a lot of brands come to us and help us develop the framework from a business opportunity and a brand positioning opportunity to become a little bit more attractive for investment.
Wow, that's an amazing offering. So it's like way beyond what the typical brand development firm does. I mean, this is like
Right.
part design, part marketing, part strategy, part innovation, part mastermind, part consult.
Yeah.
Let's say consultancy, part consultancy. So it's all like everything you need to scale, really.
It really is. It's a little bit tricky because if we use the moniker branding, which is sort of what brand development has evolved to, a lot of people still see branding as design because, branding, the original term branding meant take something iron, put it in a hot, and then sear it onto livestock. And that's branding 101. That's where the term comes from. Design is a form of branding, but as part of brand development, particularly what we do is there is a lot of business strategy involved before we even touch design. So we believe that in order for a brand to holistically resonate in marketplace, it has to walk the walk. Meaning, if you design something and it's inconsistent with your target audience or your business opportunity or category or trends, et cetera, it's making something pretty will last for a very short time. You'll have a short-term lift, but long-term, you'll have to keep coming back to the well and redefining. When we're done with the work that we do, because we go into business opportunity, into operations, we will sometimes come in and identify some sort of operational outages that impede the company's opportunity for growth when we're building a brand. We're not operational experts, meaning we won't fix it, but we'll help identify where those outages are, build upon human resources, make sure internal culture is in alignment with what the brand is doing, so that by the time you get to design becomes really, I'm going to use air quotes here, easy, because so much has already been defined that all we need to do is take all of this meaty information about target audience, innovation, brand positioning, et cetera, and codify it into a design language that is exact translation of everything that it stands for. And then it makes it really easy to sell through, because if you're front-end employee and the retail channel and then your social media strategy are all pointed at everything and the machine is firing 100%, you're golden. You're going to see those wins. You're going to see that growth.
That's amazing. And so before we even get further into your podcast and our thoughts on social, I want to make sure I tell everyone who's listening, if you want to get a hold of Diana or her business partner, David, they are at retail-voodoo.com. And I believe that's, is that your name on social media? It's retail-voodoo on LinkedIn, Retail Voodoo on Facebook, Retail Voodoo on Twitter and Instagram. So check them out. Check the amazing work that they're doing out. So Diana, let me ask you this question. How did you get started in all this?
Well, do you want the history of the brand or do you want my personal history?
Oh, no, we're talking about Diana for a minute.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's a really great story. So I was working in a marketing department in an insurance company back in 1846, before the internet. I mean, it feels like this, right?
I cannot even imagine you in insurance. I got to say, in any form.
It was fun. It wasn't property and casual. It was on the investment side. So it was a little bit different beast. That said, I was ready for a transition. I'd worked at the company for a number of years. Prior to marketing, though, I'd worked in the actuarial department. So we'll talk about two different brains. But I left that company and I went to work for a design firm in Seattle called Workhouse, which doesn't exist anymore. And had the absolute pleasure of meeting somebody named Jane Goodall, who had hired us to develop an identity for a new initiative that she had been working on. So our team got to work with her. We got to meet her. She's like about 5 foot, 12 pounds, I think, with all her clothes on, but so fierce in her determination on what her personal goal was, what she was spending her time doing. it was really hard not to be swayed by the work that she was doing. And if I layer this on top of it, my parents are immigrants, and they came to the United States kind of not under great circumstances. And so they had, as lots of immigrants do, they don't immediately buy into the American culture right away. They want to retain a lot of the things that they bring from the old country, and they were from Central Europe. And so we did not live like a traditional American household. We lived close to the land. We grew a lot of our own food, et cetera, et cetera. And there was this commonality between, and then also my dad, we used to have refugees and immigrants come through our house during that time. So my family, or my dad, had this kind of altruistic nature about him. And then I met Jane Goodall, and for whatever reason, those two things came together, and I started caring quite a bit about what was happening with the planet. Fast forward just a little bit later, the .com crash happened. I had left my design firm to work for .com, lost my job, and ended up going to work in sales for a company that sold paper to graphic designers. And I took on this keen interest on recycled paper, which at the time in 2000 was something that most people wouldn't touch. It was virgin paper had guaranteed 100% performance. Buying something that was 2 or 3 times more expensive than the virgin product didn't make sense. And yet the implications to the planet were pretty significant. And so I took that, and I was pretty much the lead salesperson in the Northwest, really pounding home the demand, trying to grow demand for recycled products because of the implications of the planet. And I learned about those implications through the planet through the project that Jane Goodall asked me us to work on. My primary goal with that project was to find paper that we could print all of her marketing materials on that did not use slave labor, did not have an environmental impact on the planet, was made from either remnant product or recycled product, et cetera, et cetera. I had all of these stipulations on people, place, planet, and there was no internet at the time, at least nothing like what we did have now. So there was a lot of me making phone calls at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning, calling governments, calling companies all over the world, trying to find resources, having things shipped in, talking with people in other countries, and asking them, to provide evidence that their wastewater wasn't flooding rice fields, or, literally I had this massive checklist. And because of that project alone, I realized how toxic our manufacturing process was. And so when I was selling paper, I just became a fierce advocate in the Northwest, saying, even if I can change one person or one company, I knew that I would have an impact, that there would be a ripple effect. You make one drop and it goes out. So from there, it just kind of took off. I've personally always had this agenda that business should be a force for good. And it may not be ending climate change. It might be something that's just in my neighborhood or just in my community or with a single client. But that's kind of where all of that kind of came from, and why I'm such a huge advocate of making sure that women and that diversity is absolutely embraced, because it's actually for the betterment of the planet.
That's phenomenal. What a great story. You literally had to do like a master's level research project, just to that paper. I mean, because so fewer and fewer people know that was actually the way we lived, right? It's like you had to
right,
like your checklist, and it was just easier to keep keep it on paper, like it is sometimes now, than like trying to Microsoft Excel, which was a disaster in the 90s anyway. So that's phenomenal. I know. So really, we can say that inspiration and like working in so many different aspects of that business, the paper business, really kind of whetted your appetite for what you're doing now.
For sure. And what I always take away from it is, it's hard. If everybody knows who Jane Goodall is, so it's hard not to feel like you can be influenced by her just because of her walking in the door. But what I always like to say is, I just remember having a conversation with her about my specific role in her project and the intenseness and in fiercity that she had about saving the jungles and saving these creatures that she had a passion for. And that that one interaction, I just remember this one interaction changed my entire POV. And it reminds me that I too can change the POV of one person in one interaction for the good or for the bad, but that I like that it was there, and that was so foundational to what I do and what I believe today is something I carry with me for sure.
That's I think it's important, and I know that in life it's almost cliche to say that we get caught up with all the urgent stuff, right?
Yeah.
And forget about the important things. It's like, what am I going to do today that's the most important thing for my day or for my week or for my month, and let me put my focus on that. And also, I love what you said about business as a force for good. Mission-driven companies are so admirable in that way, because I was talking to Brandon, who's one of the founders at One Hope Wines, and I was amazed to see that. I mean, these guys were like basically running up their credit cards, trying to sell wine and like giving away some of that money that they could do what they said they were going to do, even though they didn't have to. Because I think it's the easy thing to say is, we'll do it when we're successful. Right. We're not going to do it now. Whereas the whole mission for, as you mentioned, better for you, whether it's popcorn or whether it's peanut butter, right? It doesn't call pasta or wine or whatever it is. It's like the business can't. And I think that there is kind of this reemergence with the Z crowd, right? The Gen Z crowd, that business must do good, and we will not. Governments must do good, and I think that it's nice and happy to see that kind of change coming. Let's talk about your podcast.
Oh, okay.
It's the Gooder Podcast, and
it's the Gooder Podcast.
It's the Gooder Podcast, and it's starring none other than Diana Fryc. And what kind of who you focus on? I think I read power women that are making a difference. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And a little backstory on why that specific angle. The naturals industry, or what we will now call the better for you industry, because naturals has become a little bit squishy in its definition, has changed in the last 3-4 years because of the sheer volume of, because food technology has allowed for a lot of interesting innovation, and subsequently investment capital is really on fire about something like that. Super excited to move. We're seeing a lot of tech money come into food world because of food technology. They feel like they understand food technology. It's a little bit different. Food is different than an app or technology, but I digress. That's a conversation over a beer. Yes. But what I can say is, because the naturals category, the better for you category has exploded, there's a significant amount of growth. We're seeing a lot of leaders from the conventional category moving over into these better for you growth brands. And they're bringing kind of old school philosophies and ways of thinking, and also leadership. What does that mean? It means that in the last 10 years or so, we've gone from naturals brand being fairly equitably represented by women, men and women, and people of color. We're starting to see it shift back to predominantly white men. And nothing wrong with that, but the better for you category didn't really come from those origins. And then also, when we're thinking about what is in the best interest of brands that are better for you, we think about those demographics of people that need the education but aren't particularly represented. And women tend to do a better job about thinking about these things holistically outside of the charts and graphs and data points. So the Gooder Podcast, rather than me being grouchy and just yelling and screaming about it on social media, I decided to create this platform where I would find these women. Some of them are leaders. Some of them are emerging leaders. I've met some really fantastic women, millennials, couple of Zs that feel like they've got this really fantastic vision in all different parts. It could be operations, it could be marketing, it could be innovation, R&D, quality control, you name it. but really focus on elevating who these women are and then focusing on women diversity as well. So we're looking at women of color, we're looking at people with different religions, we're looking at immigrants, we're looking at LGBTQ, and then also we're looking at people with disabilities. Really, really hard, but these are all groups of people that tend to not be represented in the naturals and better for you marketing mix, and yet have the biggest area of need because most of them are not in the well-to-do or upper middle class financial spectrum, so to speak. And what we want to do is make sure that they are getting the same education that CPG brands bring to consumer packaged goods brands are able to share with the world because they're doing the research on how to live better and healthier lives, but make sure that we democratize it. And so the podcast is really kind of an elevation to make sure that we represent diversity so that people can see it and be it, and then make sure that it's being democratized across economic strata.
That's amazing. That's really great. I'm so keen to ask you about how all of this, and I'm writing, I've got some awesome notes here that I'm going to keep for myself, but how all this plays into what I and my company does with Firebelly, with social media. How, I'm hearing you say better for you and conscious consumers, business as a force for good, women do a better job of thinking holistically, use inspiration. It's almost like I'm to write like a playbook here, for brands on social media. Well, the right brands on social media.
Sure.
But, one of my first question is like, what in your opinion, like coming from these kinds of places and working like this, how should brands use that on their social, and what should they do with it? So.
Yeah. Well, you said something that is really important for, I think, for all listeners, whether they're in our category or in a different category. And that is, you have to be honest with yourself about whether or not you're a better for you brand or not. Oftentimes, there are companies out there that are making products that are technically better for you. If you were to compare to the worst diet imaginable, fast food and soda and that sort of thing, compared to our kale chip and Whole Foods diet. You have to be really, really honest because consumers don't want to be lied to. And so it's okay to not be a better for you brand as the category defines it. You can be better for you than the worst and help people kind of transition their way from a worse diet to a better for you diet. So own whether or not you are a better for you person or not. And then make sure that internally you are operating your business in a fashion that is in alignment with that as well. So we happen to be a B Corp. I don't know if you're familiar with that certification.
Sure.
That's in alignment with the walking the walk, this walking your talk kind of space, and where we ourselves are auditing the way we manage our business and grow our business, market our business. And what that allows us to do is then when we're developing a content strategy that extends into social media, everything that we're talking about is not just advice for people to help them determine whether or not we can help them with their specific needs, but it is demonstrating that people can aspire to be like us, that people can see how business can be a force for good for us, and then also provide that kind of cultural play that people can kind of go, oh, I like them. I like how they talk. There's a personality. It's ownable. Not the unique is tough, right? Unique. There's so many companies out there with heavy overlap, but you can be unique in the way you show up to a consumer, not necessarily in your offering. So I think the difference between being a force for good consultancy or brand versus not is doing a gut check with yourself internally and making sure that you yourself are not just marketing to those people, but that you behave in a way that's consistent, because those brands that are better for you brands want to do business and want consumers that behave and look and smell like them.
I mean, that's the kind of the theme of our podcast today is sort of like the important things, right? And
yeah,
it's interesting because as a business owner myself, I know a few years ago, we decided to do what we do for our clients and say, hey, what are our core values, right?
Right.
And we came up with the FIRE values, and it's like focus, integrity. And we did integrity because it can catch so many things, reliability.
Right.
It's just because, these days, if you say you're going to get it done on Tuesday, you get it done on Tuesday, you've already beaten the other 80%, right?
Right.
And it's interesting because I feel like being a values-driven business that is honest and sincere is what I'm taking away from what you're saying. Be honest and sincere in what you can and can't do. And then when you're showing up, because if you're not unique, saying unique doesn't make you unique. You're just saying you're unique, right? And
Right.
so what I'm taking from that is like, let's take that kind of honesty and values to social and let that live both visually and through the written word. Is that
Right?
Well, the written word, digital word. Okay, good. And so then let me ask you this question. Then I've been dying to ask you this question. How does that work with these sort of like attractive, like cool, food and beverage brands when it comes to visuals? Like we live in this proliferated like visual economy, so how do we differentiate when everyone's got these visuals? Is there actually hope for reading words and expecting that people will actually read something on social, or is it just
yeah. Not so much. I mean, this probably better than I do. I think social media, you have to use visual cues in order to make sure that to even attract the attention. We call that in my business partner, David, will frequently say this, the visual cue is the hey, hot stuff from across the bar. Nobody wants to know about your family's dirty laundry unless they find you attractive. So you kind of have to have the hey, hot stuff nailed. But then you have to know what your story is after hey, hot stuff. Otherwise, you're going to flop around. So I think the biggest challenge that we see with brands, particularly the younger brands, younger and mid-cap brands, they're maybe brands that might be less experienced in the social space or even in the branding space, is we use the term blanding. There's a kind of a design aesthetic that's being used right now that's heavily type-centric. There's probably 3 or 4 typefaces in the toolbox. There is a color palette in the toolbox. And if you start looking around, you'll see, you'll see it. If you just kind of go on Amazon and just look up beverages, you'll scroll down and you'll start to see consistency between this blanding. And it's a really easy toolbox to just be able to design against. I think what's important, and this is why when brands are able to do the type of rigorous work that we bring to the table, is you can determine what elements of that blanding palette is relative to your client, and then build a universe around that is uniquely yours. And oftentimes, like for us, when we go through brand strategy, we go through a couple of phases. We've got to go through a research phase. It's very rigorous and it includes everything from looking for research, buying research, and literally going into stores and watching how people interact within the aisles amongst categories, through all the way through kind of a validation phase when we are validating positioning concepts out in the marketplace. When we come down to the end, we develop a mood board, and the mood board is slightly different than what advertisers do. Mood boards and what we see for advertising campaigns is like, well, you can look like this, or you can look like this, or you can look like this. Our mood boards are very, very simple and really designed to be a little bit more like a audience persona board, but it is for the entire brand. It is very simple and has those very unique design cues or photographic styling cues that then get transferred into a design system, whether it's just packaging or all the way through any kind of activation that you might need at the end of the day, including social media. But getting clear on who you are and what you can uniquely own, and gets you away from blanding. An article that we just wrote was identified us identified this concept of if you try to attract every consumer, you're going to attract no consumer. And so part of it is we need to just get really clear on who are the 2 or 3 main categories of people that we're going after and just focus on them. Unless you're a PepsiCo and you've got $1 million spend on a monthly basis, millions dollar spend on a monthly basis, you really have to get tight. You got to get tight and just focus.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is so incredibly true. Because one of the things that is wonderful about social is that repetition at the top of the funnel is affordable. You're talking
right.
Like, sub penny views, and all the way up to 3 pennies for a view. And so I'm constantly telling clients, hey, listen, I know you want the conversion, and I know conversion first thinking is great, but let's focus on the fact that nobody ever bought anything from someone that didn't know a checkout, right?
Right.
None of us, your mom or your cousin or someone told you, hey, go buy this. I'm not going to buy it, right? So the top of the funnel becomes so critical, and the branding is so interesting. And I feel like branding. Just a mini rant here, but branding is sort of like the what is that Italian and the Latin phrase? It's like the language of the day for a lot of like this mid-market and smaller influencers. It's like created this flowery, like overly bright imagery. It's like escapist and it's attractive.
Yeah,
right? It's definitely the hey hot stuff, right? But the reality is that just is, it's become so much. My dad says much of a muchness. It's just all the same shit.
Like I love that. Yes.
Everywhere you look, it's like these, they look like from some weird science fiction movie. So are they actually like people or what's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, it's all like, everything's the same. And I think that is what branding is, right? It's like dumb it down, make it very likable. But at the same time, you have, as you said, no POV at that point.
Well, not only do you have no POV, but you are now competing with an entire group of competitors that all look and sound like you. And so then you are not memorable. So not only do you not have a POV, but you're not memorable. If you look and smell like somebody else, you might be endorsing somebody else. I remember talking with a brand owner one time, and they were asking me, well, what do you think of our packaging? We just had it redesigned. And I was like, well, it looks to me like somebody said, I like you to design something for us that kind of looks like RX Bar and Kind Bar had a baby. And that she was like, I can't believe you said that, because that was kind of the direction that we were going after. I'm like, well, so here's what happens. Your product's going to be on shelf and people are going to think it's RX. It's related to RX, that it's not ownable to you. And a lot of this is more for like the younger, not younger, but the less experienced marketer. They don't think that way. They think if I borrow language, then people will think that it gives me credibility. And really what it is it gives your competition free advertising.
And it dissolves, or maybe not dissolves. It like it is limited of anything to own as being your own.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'd rather own 4 things than own like 0.25 of 10 things. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fast. What? So, gosh, we could talk forever. So, let me say this: that before we ask the last question, this is happening with Firebelly Social Show. If you'd like to learn more about Firebelly, who makes brands more likable and profitable through social media, we'd love to talk to you. It's all we do, 100% social media, all the time, every day. Firebellymarketing.com. And we'll have many more awesome guests coming your way. And now back to Diana. So my last question. And I want to ask you what your favorite drink is, but I'll find out in person. But what role does music play? That's my current like obsession and preoccupation, using music to develop like personas and worlds around brands. What's your opinion on music and branding?
God, I don't know. I have not considered that. And, music is a really big passion of mine. I think is tricky, just like visual creative is tricky. I think you need to, unless you are a big company and can afford to purchase licensed music from somebody else, You kind of need to try to find something that fits the mood of your brand. It really takes a crack creative director or visual design strategist, because they can do audio as well as visual, to kind of bring music in. And I think music can work really, really well, and can make your marketing message sticky. Although in social media, I think it might be harder because most people turn their audio off.
Yes.
That would be probably something that you would know.
Correct.
But in the grand scheme of things, back when I listened to Sirius Radio, and some of the stations have advertising. There's still music on there. And sometimes somebody will come up with a new creative jingle that I cannot stand, and I will never listen to that ad ever again. And then other times they create something that just kind of creates this, for lack of a better description, immersive environment. And I think if you can do that, that works to your benefit. But it can be, it's a layer of complexity, but it really rounds out the experience.
Yeah. To be continued. Diana, I'm so excited you could be here today. Let's hear from you. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm a big LinkedIn person. So you can find me there under Diana Fryc, Fryc, under Retail Voodoo, the Gooder podcast. If you don't want all the other chit chat that I have on social media, you can just go and be connected with Gooder on LinkedIn. You can also find Retail Voodoo and the Gooder podcast on their own channels, basically on LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Diana. It's been so great having you. And for all you listeners out there, see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.